Good evening. Thank you for joining our Navigating Family Dynamics during the holidays here at Healing Circle. We are going to be working from just a standpoint of trying to figure out how to navigate family dynamics during the holidays. We're going to talk a little bit about communication styles and the importance of authenticity during family gatherings. First things first, I'll introduce myself. My name is Brenda Ramirez. I am an associate counselor here at Healing Circle. I am currently working on my clinical hours through Bowie State University. I'm working on my Master's of Arts in Counseling Psychology. A little bit about my background. I have 5 years of experience working with children and families. In my work here at Healing Circle, I'm working with adolescents and young adults. And the reason that we had chosen this topic of navigating family dynamics during the holidays is because it is something that comes up in sessions and an area that we would like to address and support people as they get into the holidays. So first things first, because we are in a space where others are joining, we are in a group setting, receiving this information, making sure that our cameras and microphones are off as we are entering the room, making sure that we are within the confidentiality. So to respect that, please put only your initials to change your name. And then if there's any questions that come up as I am presenting the information, please feel free to put them in the chat. At the end of our presentation, we'll have some time to answer those questions and have some discussion. So to frame our time together, we're going to start by defining family dynamics, describing what that means. Then we will move into forms of communication and why those are important. We will then learn how to understand ourselves, how we present in these family dynamics, how we handle these situations, and then moving into how to navigate proactively. That's where we'll really spend some time learning strategies and how to prepare ourselves for the holidays. Like I mentioned in the previous slide, we will be having some time for answering questions towards the end and some discussion. So, family dynamics. To frame our thinking, we need to define what family means to us, because the definition of family itself has evolved over time. Not everyone has the same definition of what family means to them, because family structure changes as people move, as people's families change. So a family can be fluid. Think of your family as your family members who are close with you, who help you. These can even be your non-biological family. I'm talking friends. Like if you are living away from your biological family, your friend group can be considered your family as well. So this also encapsulates blended families. All of these are family structures that we can consider for our family dynamics. So what is family dynamics? What do we mean when we say that? Family dynamics are defined as the patterns of interactions between relatives, between your family members, the roles that they play in their family and relationships, and the various factors that shape their interactions, like financial, to name one. And because this is something that is such an ingrained part of our lives, family dynamics is one of the primary sources of relationship security or relationship stress. Family members rely on each other for emotional and physical, as well as economic support. And the interactions among family members can have lasting impacts and influence on a person. This includes your development, your well being, in terms of your behavior and your psychological state. Family dynamics have the power to impact a person in all of those ways. And family dynamics is also a concept that is universal. It's present in all cultures. It looks different across different cultures, but it is a system and a pattern of interaction that is present. So, what we need to consider is what kind of family dynamics there are, and potentially thinking about where our own family dynamic lies. Now, I tend to lean away from positive and negative, but these are the terms that they use. They define positive dynamic as a family system that provides love and advice and care. Um, Research has shown that the primary factors of a positive dynamic are individuality, mutuality, which is a shared feeling of cohesion and warmth with your family members. And it's actually been identified as the most vital factor in a positive dynamic. There's also flexibility within the family, but stability as well. There's clear communication amongst the family members and reciprocity. What that means is the way that people respond to others or the roles that they adopt in response to the roles other members in the family play. On the other side of the coin, there is a negative dynamic, which is often described as having lots of arguments, constant critical feedback, and there's lots of burdensome demands. This can cause stressful family relationships that are impacted by primary factors such as enmeshment. What that means that there is very unclear boundaries among family members. Um, there's also isolation, so isolating from the family, isolating from others. Rigidity, so that means, the roles are firm. There's not a lot of space for flexibility among the family members or among the structure, which kind of leads into a disorganization. So, not having very clear communication also plays a part in that disorganization. And then having role conflict. So that occurs when there's like multiple demands and multiple roles clashing in amongst the family members. And it's important to consider which dynamic is more what your family looks like in order to understand how to approach the situation. Is it a positive dynamic? Is it a dynamic where you might need some more strategies to navigate the holiday time? So all of this information is to say, why do we need to know this? Why do we need to understand what family dynamics are? We want to navigate a dynamic and we need to understand the impact that it can have on us. Family dynamics and the quality of family relationships can positively and negatively or negatively impact our health, the way that we show aggression. It can also account for trauma and stress and different behavioral patterns. For example, if we're thinking about health, family dynamics do have the ability to impact our health. When there are negative family dynamics, that can lead to an increased risk of different health factors. That includes poor sleep outcomes, increased blood pressure, and in some cases, for children when they're younger, it can even cause obesity or be a contributing factor to obesity. However, when we look on the other side, when there is a positive family dynamic where there is mutuality among the family members, it is often associated with better health outcomes, including sleep and positive interactions, can also help with in the younger, as opposed to having obesity is assisting the children from developing that. When we think about aggression, family dynamics can play a big part in how that develops in a person. If there is a lot of role conflict between parents and children, or parents and adolescents as they're growing, it is a contributing factor that is associated with adolescent aggression. So when there's conflict within the family, that can sometimes present in a way that comes across as aggression in the different family members. This is not only in the family setting, that can also trickle into others like school. When we are thinking about trauma and stress, so like we heard in the previous, unhealthy family dynamics cause stress. They're a source of um, discomfort for some people. And so this can lead to trauma if it's something that a child is dealing with since they're young, and it can cause stress in adults as they grow up. And then for four, in terms of behavior, if there is a stressful relationship at home, if there is a family dynamic where there's a lot of arguments, unclear communication, this can lead to poor coping mechanisms, which we'll talk about in our next section. But on the other side of that, if there is a supportive relationship amongst family members, your family members can also encourage you to have better behaviors, to behave in a healthier and more positive way. A big part of family dynamics is communication. We heard in the slide where we saw the two sides that positive family dynamics have clear communication between family members, and on the other side of that, in a negative family dynamic, there is unclear communication amongst family members, unclear communication about expectations. So what we're going to do here is we're going to look over the four types of communication styles. So the first one we're going to talk about is passive. After we describe and talk a little bit about passive, we'll get into passive aggressive communication style, aggressive communication style, and an assertive communication style, which is where we want to live. So passive communication, as you might notice from the graphic, oftentimes when people are referred to as passive, the term of doormat is sometimes used. So there's a connection there. What that means is that with passive communication, the person's style is to really defer to other people's opinions. They prioritize others over themselves, even over their own feelings. A person who has a passive communication style is often very soft spoken, is indirect in their communication, so they don't often confront, if ever. And they are apologizing for their emotions. They are denying their own needs when they are communicating with others. So this communication style is one that can be attributed to, oh, I'll go with whatever you guys want. It's often the person that is not sharing an opinion. Then we look into the passive aggressive communication. Now, this communication style is one that is Again, indirect. They are not saying things directly to a person that might be bothering them, or they have difficulty expressing their emotions, so they project them onto others or in other ways. Um, this kind indirectly expresses anger sometimes when people make passive aggressive comments like, it's fine, I'll just do it myself. A lot of the times it is said in a way that displays frustration or anger because someone has done something they might not agree with. This is also showcased in backhanded compliments, compliments that they say is a compliment, but it doesn't feel that way. And they're often the people who deny that there is a problem. They are not someone who's going to say that they outright are having an issue among the family members. And sarcasm is a communication style that people with that passive aggressive streak often lean into. Which leads us into aggressive communication. Think of a bullhorn. It's loud. It's goes over others. There is a very dominating kind of sound that comes out of it. Um, and that's kind of how we can think of aggressive communication. It is often inappropriately honest. So while they are expressing what they think is a fact, often it is not in a way that's meant to help another person, which leads into that dominating character. They want to dominate others. They don't really listen well. These this communication style is often the people who criticize or blame. They are not someone who looks inward for an issue and have a very low tolerance for frustration. So often they will walk away or use confrontation in a loud, argumentative way. A lot of the times when they're talking to someone and trying to confront them, they use you. So it's something you are doing. It's your fault that this did not go well. So as I mentioned when we went over the list, assertive communication is where you want to live. Sometimes assertive communication is misinterpreted as a form similar to aggression, and that is not the case at all. Assertive communication is actually the most direct form of communication where they are affirming their feelings, they're being appropriately honest. So, what that means is they're stating facts in a way that are not incorporating judgment. In an assertive communication style, this is where a person advocates from themselves. They are stating what they need. They are utilizing I statements like, I feel sad because blank. So they're able to say how they're feeling without placing blame on others. An assertive communication style is also someone who is empathetic with the family members they are communicating with. They make sure that they are listening, they make sure they are not interrupting, but they're also being honest about their feelings. An assertive communication style also keeps it brief. It's not something that is meant to turn into a long, kind of drawn out conversation or argument. It's meant to say what they need appropriately and advocating for oneself without it snowballing into a different form of communication. What this might look like is telling a family member, I'm finishing something up. Once I finish those things, I will have time to help you. Is that okay with you? They're sharing that they are busy. They are empathizing with the person that they will need help and then checking in. So, We're armed with all this information. We have defined family and family dynamics. We know what the communication styles are. Now it's time for us to understand our roles a little bit more as we are navigating family dynamics. So, while family dynamics can be difficult and stressful during the holidays, we also have to acknowledge that we play a role ourselves because we are part of that family dynamic. So think of that communication skills that we just learned. Which one resonated with you? How do you feel you communicate within your family dynamic? In this section, we will work to understand how we show up when we are coming to the holidays or we are interacting with our family. So first, we need to understand, how do you feel, react, and process interactions, or how do you deal with these things with your family? For example, what emotions arise after you have had an interaction with a particular family member? Let's say this family member has an aggressive communication style. Does that make you feel frustrated or angry, or does it make you feel sad? It's important to understand the emotions that arise, and in turn, how do we then react? Do we argue with our family member? Do we walk away from the family member? What is our reaction to an interaction with them? And after all is said and done, how do we process what happened? How do you process an interaction with a family member afterwards? Is this something that you're able to think through and move on? Or is it something that we're constantly thinking about until the next time that we see them? So, how we feel, react, and process are very much based on our triggers. Triggers is just a word that means something is particularly impacting for you. And during the holidays, we are often surrounded by family and friends that we might not see as often, and they might do things that make us feel upset, hurt, or uncomfortable. So, understanding how these things make us feel. Is there a particular area that is a source of emotion for you? For example, having very rigid roles and expectations, is that something that is hard to navigate, or too much pressure? Does it make you feel overwhelmed? Especially if we consider going back to our parents' houses where they put expectations on us like they did when we were children. Questioning is also a big one that comes up during the holidays. Like I said, sometimes we see aunts, uncles, extended family members, or friends that we don't see as often. And these are family members that ask questions that might be particularly triggering for us. Think of questions like, if you are a single person, a question that is often asked: when are you getting married? Why don't you have a boyfriend? Why don't you have a girlfriend, etc.? If you are married and you don't have kids, another question that comes up and can be um, a source of stress or maybe uncomfortability is: when are you having kids? Why haven't you had kids? These kinds of questions can make us feel uncomfortable. They can make us feel sometimes angry or upset, depending on the reason of why we have not gotten married or why we have not had children. Communication style can also very much be a trigger. Think of the aggressive and passive aggressive communication styles in particular. Those are often the indirect communication styles that can deny a person's feelings. They can express anger towards other people. And when we're dealing with that communication style, it can make us feel emotional, it can make us feel overwhelmed. So, knowing what a person's communication style is can help us identify our triggers as well. Judgment. So, hearing judgment from family members is something that can be a particular trigger. Sometimes that can present itself as, judgment over weight loss or weight gain. It can also be judgment about an occupation or being in college or not being in college. These are things that can make us feel particularly impacted by these interactions. And finally, a lack of support. So feeling like you are going to your family dynamic and that if there is a particularly uncomfortable situation and you feel that there is a lack of support, that can exasperate how we're already feeling. As I mentioned towards the beginning, talking a little bit about the coping mechanisms, we need to understand, how do we cope? There's some that are positive and helpful. There's some that just cause us to withdraw. So we need to understand, how are we coping with these situations? For example, numbing. You're shutting down, you're no longer participating in the conversation. This might feel like it provides relief from the stress and for the anxiety, but it also does not allow for expression of need and expression of feelings, which is similar to disengagement. Um, Often that means we're going on our phone, we're no longer engaging in the conversation. You're reducing the effort that you're putting into the conversation or into the social situation. Again, that's similar to withdrawing. It's something that we might do when we're feeling overwhelmed or needing to be stimulated in a different way. Sometimes when we cope, blaming and self-blaming can occur. What this means is we're either putting the full responsibility on someone else or we're putting the full responsibility on ourselves. Again, think of that passive and the aggressive communication styles. A passive communication style is someone who's going to self-blame. They're going to take responsibility for someone else's feelings before they consider their needs. And the aggressive communication style will be blaming someone else for things that might be their responsibility or something that they are needing to be held accountable for. Escape is something we do. We leave, we get out of there, and then that ends up turning into avoiding sometimes, just avoiding situations or events in general for fear that it's going to cause us to be upset, avoiding because it might cause anxiety. So, while the previously mentioned coping mechanisms might help in the moment, they don't address the issues that we have within our family dynamics. Um, what we want to learn to do is how to navigate the family dynamic proactively. How can we address our feelings and our needs that is affirmative but empathetic? That is stating our point, but not letting it snowball into a long argument or conversation, being very purposeful in how we're navigating our interactions with our family members. So, what we need to do first things first is prepare ourselves. The good thing about the holidays is they happen at the same time every year. So, that can help us prepare for knowing what's going to happen, who we're going to see, where we're going to go. If it's your parents, your grandmas, prepare yourself with what is going to happen at the family event. And prepare yourself in a way that can set boundaries and advocate for yourself. Boundaries is one of those things that can be difficult to uphold when we're around family. However, using assertive communication can help in expressing our boundaries to others in a way that is clear and respectful, uh, but it expresses our needs and our expectations to others. Some boundaries that are typically set is topics of communication or conversation, which leads back to that questioning trigger. If there are certain questions or topics that are not a topic that is comfortable for you, then saying, I would do not want to talk about this right now. Can we change the subject? You're sharing your need, that it's not something that you're willing to discuss. And then boundaries. If you know that there is a particularly negative family dynamic going on or something is triggering you, then setting some time limits. Maybe we're only going to the event for an hour. Maybe we are setting time limits with our family members in terms of conversation. Those are all boundaries that we can use to make sure that we are handling our needs. And then reframing. This is a practice skill. It's something that assertive communication can help us do. So, empathy is an important part of the assertive communication process, and understanding that we cannot control our family members. We can't control how they behave. We can't control the way that they communicate, but we can reframe and think that the only thing that we can control is us. So, how are we navigating the dynamic from a different perspective? Are we looking at it from an assertive communication standpoint, where we're learning how to be direct, how we're learning to advocate for ourselves in a situation where you cannot control other people? Which leads into that practice, practicing your assertive responses to questions. I statements are one of my favorite assertive communication techniques, saying, I feel X because Y. I need Z. So you fill in those blanks with your feelings, the reason why you feel the way that you do, and stating what do you need to support yourself in the moment. Then we can look for support. So, knowing if you have someone in the family dynamic that is a supportive person for you, you guys are in a similar dynamic together. So, that might be someone who can empathize, someone who can validate your feelings. And if not, thinking of a friend that maybe you can call and have support you taking a break from a conversation. And finally, plan. How much time can you manage with your family? Can you handle 2 hours? Maybe we can only handle an hour to an hour and a half. Planning how much time you can manage and then setting up your communication for when it's time for you to leave. And if you are dealing with a particularly heavy or triggering family dynamic, how can you self-care afterwards? How are you taking care of yourself after dealing with a particularly heavy or stimulating family dynamic or event? And then we just have some quick tips, things that are easy to implement in the moment that can help us re-ground ourselves into the moment, help us step out of the emotions if strong emotions do arise. For example, deep breathing. My go-to is always the box breathing, taking a deep breath in, hold it, let it out, hold it. As you draw a shape of a box using your finger. There are many deep breathing techniques, simple ones that can be used. Let's say if your child or your niece, nephew are struggling, an easy one that is age appropriate for kids is smell the flower. blow out the candle. That imagery can also help us kind of reset and refocus. Similar to deep breathing is going out and getting fresh air. If you need to leave the area for a second, but maybe you feel like leaving the event is not necessary, then just stepping out to get some fresh air can be helpful. Taking some deep breaths outside can help center us and help cool us down, especially if there is an argument or a particularly aggressive family member. That is a way to help our body physically calm down. Talking to a friend is similar to what we talked about, having someone for support, knowing that you can call them if you do need someone to talk to, and just center yourself again before you're coming back in. Meditation is another one, again, that is similar to deep breathing. There are many different meditation follows that you can do on YouTube. We particularly like to use the body scan. So, going through your body, how do you feel in your feet? Where are you holding tension? Those are all things that can help us self-care afterwards, taking a second in the car to do a little bit of mindfulness, or doing it beforehand, whichever way works for you to help you feel comfortable. And self-compassion. Self-compassion actually encompasses 3 different pieces, which is mindfulness, self-kindness, and connectedness. So self-compassion involves recognizing when we are stressed or we are struggling without judging ourselves for it. It's normal to feel overwhelmed. It's normal to be stressed out by our families. But how are we handling it? Are we judging ourselves for that, or are we validating the fact that we can feel our feelings? Self-kindness is something that is described as being supportive or understanding towards ourselves, especially when we're having a hard time. Instead of being very overly critical of how we might have handled the situation, how are we being kind to ourselves in the moment and avoiding that criticism? And connectedness. So this goes back into that assertive communication. That empathy piece is so important. Remembering that everyone makes mistakes and experiences difficulties at times. We are not alone. We also can acknowledge that our family members are dealing with their own things. And so having that connected piece can also help us feel better in the moment of, we don't understand what's going on with everyone, but I can control myself. These are all tips that we practice in session with our clients. And if you are interested in following up, so we'll do a little question at the end, but if you're interested in following up, we have our information. Here is my email, the office phone number, and our practice website. And I'm going to exit the screen so that we can answer any questions or have some discussion time.
Thank you, Brenda. Actually, we'll go ahead and stop the recording. But for those who joined us, thank you very much. And we hope everyone has a wonderful evening.